The pendulum swing of historiography is very noticeable in writing about the blacklist. At the height of the domestic Cold War, aside from one book by Gordon Kahn, a blacklisted writer, Hollywood on Trial, 1948, occasional articles by the blacklistees, and the groundbreaking article by Elizabeth Poe, The Hollywood Story, 1954, all those who wrote about the subject either denied its existence or approved of it and condemned the blacklistees. Perhaps the peak of the campaign to diminish the blacklisted as artists, and by extension serious political players, occurred in Murray Kempton's A Part of Our Time, 1955, his book of essays on the 1930s. Their story, he wrote, is a failure of promise. The promise at the beginnings of most of them appears now to have been largely smoke and thunder. They got rich fabricating empty banalities to fit Hollywood's ideal of life in America. Even John Cogley's two-volume Report on Blacklisting, 1956, the mainstream book that exposed the mechanics of the blacklist in film and television, which was based to a large extent on Poe's reporting, is riddled with the anti-communist bias of Cogley and his other main reporter, Paul Jacobs. The unfriendly witnesses are treated in a hostile manner and falsely accused of having administered their own blacklist in the preceding decade. Nor did the erosion of the blacklist, beginning in 1960 with Dalton Trumbo's screen credits for Exodus and Spartacus, change the tenor of the commentary. Richard Corliss, in his series of essays on 35 screenwriters, singled out Dalton Trumbo for some of his sharpest barbs, including him among the left-wing writers who were, in his words, footnotes in Hollywood history. He did, however, praise the work of two other left-wing writers, Donald Ogden Stewart and Sidney Bookman. Walter Goodman, in his critical study of the House Committee on Un-American Activities, called the unfriendly witnesses craftsmen, more or less adept at setting down on paper the ideas in a producer's head. It was not arduous work, and their careers parodied the writer's craft. These supercilious comments continued into the 1970s with Stephen Canfor. They were responsible for pap, but they were also concerned with the little man, and Hilton Kramer, loyal, pampered, high-priced hacks. A major swing in viewpoint occurred in 1968, with Howard Suber's doctoral dissertation fully exposing the mechanics of the blacklist. He was the first person since Poe to interview some of the people involved. He spoke with 6 of the 19 unfriendly witnesses who were subpoenaed by the House Committee on Un-American Activities to appear at its October 1947 hearings into Communist Infiltration of the Motion Picture Industry: John Howard Lawson, Lester Cole, Albert Maltz, Ring Lardner Jr., Howard Koch, and Edward Dmytryk, studio head Dory Sherry, and Robert Kenny, an attorney for the 19. Unfortunately, he could not find a publisher. 4 years later, however, the actor Robert Vaughn succeeded in turning his Ph.D. dissertation on blacklisting into a book, Only Victims. He also interviewed the blacklisted people, and he performed a significant service by including the statements that 10 of the members of the 19 who actually testified in October 1947 were not permitted to read during their testimonies before the House Committee. Then, in 1976, the documentary film Hollywood on Trial allowed the blacklistees to speak for themselves. They came across as serious, intelligent people and stirred the curiosity of some of its watchers to learn more about them, especially their political pasts, which had been ignored by the previous naysayers. The tide turned fully in the early 1980s with the publication of The Inquisition in Hollywood, Naming Names, and The Hollywood Writers' Wars. All 3 were deeply researched.